Netflix. And that was at the time where Netflix was about to go global, and they made the service accessible, available everywhere in the world.
Here we are. Good morning, friends. Good afternoon, good night, wherever in the world you are. This is Javi. I'm your host of the Emerging Mind podcast powered by BureauWorks. And today I am overexcited. Again, I'm always excited with you guys.
That is true.
I live in an excitement mode constantly. And today I'm bringing you the one and only Katell Jentreau. How are you, Katell?
I'm good. Hi, Javi. Very nice to see you.
Oh, good. Thanks for being here. Thanks for
Of
being a guest
course.
in our podcast. Like we started this. It's October 2024. We started this 9 months ago. Those
Mhm.
who follow us have seen the growth of the podcast and have seen the interviews we've done with several localization, globalization industry leaders and people that are in the tech world. So I'm excited to have you here. Thanks for that. I don't
Thank
know.
you for having me. I
Oh,
look forward to it.
yes. Like we normally go through the life and the journey of the leader. And I don't know if you met Katell, but Katell is like, to me, is an industry celebrity. He's one of the most well-known industry leaders that we've got here. And just, I want to tell you a few words just to introduce herself, and then she'll do it better than I do. But she's the Senior Director of Globalization at the Expedia Group with extensive experience from companies like Netflix, Box, and Yahoo. Her skill set of international strategy is incredible. Her educational background includes a trilingual master's degree in foreign languages and international business. You can explain us how you got that. And colleagues describe her as a compassionate leader who encourages teams to excel and navigate complex projects with humor and grace. How was that? Is that accurate?
It's close enough.
Well, so as I said, thanks for being here. And I always want to start because our interviews are not focused on the way you work or your programs or anything like this. We want to really bring in the human behind the leader, right? The human behind that person that everybody knows, respects, does those posts on LinkedIn, shares knowledge, etc. Right? So, firstly, let me ask you, where are you from? Where do you come from? And how do you stumble upon the localization industry? Because everyone coming from everywhere, like finds this industry at some point in life and it's like, I am staying, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll go back in time. So I was born and raised in France. I grew up in France, and but with always a very keen interest in foreign languages and abroad, kind of traveling, this kind of stuff. My mom was born and raised in Morocco and spoke fluent Arabic. Not that I can, but I could understand some words. My dad probably still speaks Spanish, and so and we used to travel to Spain quite a bit, and I always had that interest. When I was in school, I started learning foreign languages, English, Spanish. After that, I did some German in high school. That was not a good memory. And so after that, I started when I went to college. I was interested in staying in that realm. It was not super clear at the time, like what basically you could be a teacher or you could be something else in translation, but there was not. I didn't really have the clarity of what that meant, and I landed, in international business. I think really what I wanted to do was subtitling, but it was really far away, and it was, the master's was not where I used to live, so it was more complex. So I landed there, and that was fine. I enjoyed that, and I started traveling abroad. So I think from the age of about 19, I started spending more time abroad than in France,
Yeah.
through programs like Erasmus and things like that. So I did a good chunk of my third year in college in Zaragoza in Spain. I used to be fluent in Spanish, but I will not. I will not
Sorry,
try
no,
it now.
not in front of the camera. No, no, no.
No, no. And then in England, after that, I did my postgrad degree in the north of England in Manchester, and after that, I went back to France, and I did also. I went to the US for the first time, where I did a year in a college as a French teaching assistant, like just to get that experience, and it was a lot of fun. And then I went back to France to look for a permanent job, and I really struggled with that. So I landed back in England, where I had friends who had actually moved there, and were working in the localization space, which I didn't really know what it was at the time, but I was like, okay, I can translate. I know language and I know words, so I started doing that. Mostly, it was a small LSP at the time, which has
Yes.
disappears now, and they were focused on video games,
Okay. Well,
most video games mostly. And so we would localize, actual games, and then documentation around it and this kind of stuff. So I did translation, like really translation, hands-on translation, for a couple of years, and then I moved into team management, and leadership generally. But I was on the vendor side for about 15 years before I moved to the buyer side. So, and for me, that experience was very important. I think this is where I learned the details of the business. And to this day, like when I interview people for roles, I'm always interested in people who've had both the vendor and buyers experience, in their background, because it really shows like a good balance of skills, experience, and I found that usually you have more rounded person, in terms of experience. Yeah,
it's beautiful because you have the classical profile of anyone
I
that's
know. I
leading any localization team right now, especially on the buyer side. Somebody that just left abroad, somebody that didn't know what to do with their life, somebody that stumbled upon the industry somehow, that
know. I
started
know.
at the very bottom in the on the vendor side, climbed up, understood the business, and went to where you are, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
like welcome to the cloud, let's say, right?
I
Like
know. I mean, it's a pretty classic
it is. And it's so
path
beautiful at
there.
the same time. It's so beautiful at the same
Yeah.
time because it makes us like it makes our industry that particular of with that particularity of everyone being so international, right? Having to thrive abroad, having to get out of the comfort zone of living in the
Hmm.
place we
Hmm.
were born and raised, right? And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
like that a lot, and that makes us, I think, as well connect very well between us all, and it's pretty beautiful, right? So yeah,
Yeah. No, it is. When I moved to the buyer side,
yes.
which was about like 13 years ago,
Tell us about
when
tell us
I
about
moved
that.
to the US. Sorry, say that again.
Tell us about that switch. How you?
Yeah, so that switch was like, at the time. So my spouse got a job offer here in Silicon Valley
Yeah.
as a programmer, and we moved the entire family. And at that point, so I was with SDL, RWS, for those of us who knew it before, and I did not move with them. Like there was no role for me, which in hindsight was great, because it meant that I looked elsewhere, and I landed on the buyer side at Yahoo. It was my first job in the US. I was part of the centralized loc team that Salvo Giamaresi put together
The
at
great
at
Salvo.
Yahoo. I know, and hi to
Yes.
Salvo, and he was my boss, and a great mentor. So I was there not very long. That was the that was the year that Yahoo had 5 CEOs. So there was some
Oh.
some thought.
Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
my first job, but also my experience of my first layoff. So that was that was interesting. But I was very lucky to land at Box, which was still is a SaaS enterprise company, file sharing, and I was the first loc person that they hired. So I had the opportunity to put in place, the program, the function, and build a lot of stuff. I had very limited resources to do so, but I also did great stuff with the engineering team, even product management, which I had never the opportunity to do. So it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot in that time. I was with them for about 3.5 years, I think. And then I moved to Netflix, and that was at the time where Netflix was about to go global.
Okay.
They literally in January 2016 flips a switch. Maybe there was a big button, I don't know, and they made the service accessible, available everywhere in the world, aside from a few markets. And so the globalization team was localization team at the time, was there to really, provide an localized experience to people in the different markets. So I think at the time there was probably about Netflix was available in about 30 markets, and then everywhere. But of course, you didn't have localization available in all the markets. So then the work was to add language support and localized experience in one or two or three or four markets at a time, languages at a time,
Yes.
in the subsequent years. And I was there for about 7 years. And I worked like very globally. I had teams in APAC, in Europe, in LATAM. My role changed a few times, very, very focused on the language experience. And I learned a lot. I notably learned a lot about, how impactful you can be to the business in the globalization space. I think we were very lucky that international was very much, still is, a big focus for the company. They knew that the growth was outside of the US, and so there was like this huge, a playing field that was there for people to go after, but very complex in a lot of ways, especially in scaling creativity, which is what a lot of the team spend doing. And for me, I discovered an entire new world of the content localization space, which is very different from the product localization. It has different players, different vendors, and funnily enough, subtitling, which is something that I had
You
been
know,
interested in when
yeah,
I was back, in high school. But yes, so a lot of the time was spent around, figuring out how to scale, really, really scale creativity. I don't think I had understood what scale was until I worked for Netflix.
that's
Um,
the role that people mostly know you for because you've been there.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And it makes me think of something to ask you right now, and
Yeah.
it's about since I would like to present you and to those listening to the podcast and watching the podcast. Um, One thing that I would like to ask about is like, can you think of a particular achievement that really said like, hey, this was awesome. This thing that I did was awesome. The difficulty
Mm.
to get there as well.
Yeah.
And those it's a question. It's three questions in one. And are you the kind of person that is more like, I've achieved it all, or the best is yet to come?
It depends. I think, I'm excited by possibilities of
Yes.
what's yet to come. I'm also like, I am very proud of what I have personally accomplished, notably at Netflix. And, leading teams that, in my view, are probably the strongest in the industry in terms of expertise in their field, but also business savviness
Mhm.
and ability to influence, stakeholders and really help to craft an experience that is very impactful to the business. So that I think is great. But I'm excited about, the possibilities of what I want to accomplish at Expedia and working with a team which is very engaged and very very skilled at what they do
Mhm.
as well. And in the context of an industry that is changing at the moment,
Yes. Yes.
and so it's a little bit scary but very exciting at the same time. So that's kind of what makes it also
It's
challenging but fun, really.
yes, like I keep talking as I said in the beginning to several leaders, and everyone really agrees that now, like late 2024, is really a moment of change and of new of the
Hmm.
big boom of AI and all this
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
listen to all the time, right? But what I think it stays the same. It's the human element, right? The human element is always
Yep.
there, right? And
Hmm.
since I want to go a little bit deeper into that and about your
Hmm.
human
Hmm.
element in particular, of course, and your leadership style, because you have 20
Hmm.
plus years of leading teams in big multinationals, big tech companies, right? Like, I would like to ask
Yeah.
you, in this particular field, how would you describe your way of leading teams, Katell? How would you do that?
So I'm not a micromanager.
Okay, which is great
I
because
am.
not everybody can say this, and I love it.
I really, I found that if you hire the right people, if you have the right people on your team, your job as a leader is made like so much easier, and you
Yes.
don't have to micromanage. You're there to guide, to remove obstacles, to answer questions, and to, be kind of a sounding board. And that's the best place to be. Like when you have people who are so good at what they do that you're just them to give them guidance, but they are smarter than you, and they should be. You should always hire people who are smarter than you. Don't be afraid of that. It will make your life much easier.
Yes, let me
So
just hear,
yeah.
what makes, because sometimes you hear from leaders, oh my God, I gotta be like the leading person, like the top of everything. And that thing that you just mentioned is very interesting. Like not being scared of having somebody that could potentially be more smart than you, like smarter than you, right? I hear this all the time, and I hear from people, dude, I'm better than my boss. And that can create some potential, like,
I mean, maybe. I personally am not afraid of hiring people who have skills that I don't have.
yeah,
I think it's good to complement. I also know what I'm strong at, and maybe they are less strong in those areas, but that's okay. And it's also okay to hire somebody who might be your successor. Actually, you should always, as a leader, think about that. Like, who, if I were to leave, in a year's time or next month, who will step in and be that leader? Do I have anybody on my team who can do this? So I personally don't think that people should be afraid of this. I don't know. I was going to say something that maybe is controversial. I was going to say maybe women are less afraid of that than men.
okay,
And it is a broad generalization, but I think generally, as a woman, I'm not. We tend to be less competitive for like, we need to be the best and we need to be seen as being the best all the time, and everybody else, should be squished under and not being seen. That's generally not like most women think. There are some women who are like that, and of course, women are ambitious as well and want to succeed. But I think there is less of that panic that, oh, what if I'm not the top dog all the time? I
yeah,
mean, that's certainly not the way that I think. And I have experienced the difference between leading teams where I had to kind of carry people versus, teams where people were very smart and very good at what they did, and they just like get on with it, and we're with it, and we're very impactful. And your job as a leader is so much easier in the second case. That for me, it's the incentive to always look for those people when I hire, for sure.
okay, okay, okay. That makes me think as well. Like, do you follow any particular strategy, or do you follow any particular steps when once you've hired those people, those
Mhm.
individuals, and they're great, to create and build trust among them? Is there like, oh,
Mhm.
does that happen naturally? How do you see it?
So I think, generally you need, I mean, I find that you need to give people the information they need and connect them to other people that they need to talk about, and give them a general guidance as to what the vision is and what they need to achieve. But then, depending on what the roles are, and of course, if you are hiring a very junior person, it's going to be completely different than a very experienced, program manager or director or whatever. So, but give them guidance as to what are the goals and the direction you want them to take. But after that, let them, manage their own space, and let them, come up with the solutions.
Hmm.
I don't think it's my role to just come up with, tell you exactly how to do things. If that's the case, then I'm doing something wrong, because my team is not empowered to find those solutions. So that's the way that I see it. I am to go back to your initial question. I'm also somebody who's very informal in the way that I deal with people. I like to create rapport. I like to create relationship with people. I always spend a lot of time asking people about, their weekends and what's going on in their lives, and sometimes I forget that they already told me, but hopefully they don't mind that too much. But I for me, it's very important to have that human connection, connection. I do suffer a little bit from being working from home, all the time. I am very
Yes.
grateful I can do it, but at the same time, not having that human connection
Yeah.
can be difficult. So I love it when I can travel, when I
I
can
am
go and
with
see
you.
my team. I know, of course
I
you
am
are.
with you. I have been a physical office in the last 6 years. I am lucky that my role allows me to be here today with a friend that is in the industry, with you next week or whoever,
Yeah,
and I sort of substitute that for that. Right, I'm good, but
I know. You have a perfect job, Javi.
for myself, yeah, I can
For
ask for
you,
anything
yeah.
else.
For you, yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't ask for anything else. That's very true. That's very true. It makes
Yeah.
me like, this is beautiful. I'm really enjoying the conversation, Catalina. It makes me think of one other thing, because you're used, and me too, to be working in this industry, which is is really fast paced, right? And you're mentioning again like how much you get in touch with your people to ask how they are, if they're doing okay, if,
Mhm,
if
mhm,
you don't micromanage, but
mhm,
also one of the important aspects in this like super high paced tech industry when you're in the leading position is, I guess, like also providing feedback, right? Providing
mhm,
feedback. You're doing
mhm.
right or you're doing wrong.
Yep.
Are there any particular
Yep.
strategies you follow that you recommend, or to those listening that
Yeah.
you?
So I spent 7 years of my corporate life at Netflix, where feedback is a huge thing. Feedback is expected continuously. There's also like formal, frameworks to do this, but basically, you should never come to the formal feedback request with surprises. You should always have those conversations. So I think that muscle have actually worked through it. In the time I was there, and now, for me, it's very important to provide feedback promptly,
Mhm.
and to make it constructive but clear. You probably heard about the shit sandwich that sometimes you get. Oh, I'll give you something good, and then I'll slice in some
Bad
bad
stuff.
feedback, or some constructive feedback, and then I'll end up with some nice things. The problem with that is that the middle bit gets lost, and if the middle bit is actually very important, it could be that it's just a side thing, and a small minor point that you want to bring up, but it's not really impacting the performance or anything like that. In which case it's kind of okay, but make the time for that piece, because it's important that people hear it clearly and don't hear it blurred by other great stuff. And you should absolutely mention the great stuff, and it's very important to do that. But the feedback, if there's a point that is a little bit trickier to address, whether it's negative, constructive, whatever you want to call it, you need to be very clear about what it is, what you want the behavior to be, or the goals to be, and be very detailed about that. So I think I used to be like a lot of people. I didn't like doing that, and I was definitely
Mhm.
doing the shit sandwich. And I've learned to do something a little bit different, because you need to be heard, and you want to see an improvement in the behavior. It's not necessarily something that came naturally to me, but I've worked through that, and I think I've become better at it. It's not always perfect, but yeah.
I think feedback is a great way as well to establish conversations and to
Hmm.
really know who you are working with, who you have in your team, right? And it makes me think as well of another topic, Katel. Like,
Actually, if I can interrupt you, Javier,
yeah,
just thought
sure.
that I think the idea of the shit sandwich, I didn't make this up. This is in Aaron Mayer's book, The Culture Map. If you've never read this, I would really recommend it. It's kind of a basic book to read, like for us, in the global business.
Well,
And she talks a lot about how feedback is given and received in very different ways depending on the cultures. It can be very direct, it can be very indirect, depending on who you talk to. And she has a whole sets of example. It's really interesting, and I think that expression comes from her. So I didn't want to take credit
okay.
for it.
Okay, okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. Like that I was, as I was saying, that feedback providing, that feedback talking, and because I'm guessing you also receive feedback, right, from those you are
Mm-hmm.
leading, from
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I,
I do.
I
I
mean,
hate it. I
You
hate
hate it?
it. I
You do
hate
it?
it.
Really? Okay, tell me why. Why do you hate it?
I just, it's cringy. Like especially the written feedback. Like when we have at Netflix, we used to have this thing where
I am aware of that. Yeah.
once a year, like it would be live at the same time for everybody in the world, and so people will rush and read the feedback, and I would be like, oh, just leave me alone for like, I don't want to look at it for like a day or two or whatever.
Yeah.
People are very hungry for that feedback. For me, it's like constructive negative feedback is very hard to take, and
Okay.
so I always need a little time to digest it and think through it and analyze it and detail it and say, okay, well, what does that mean? What did I do that I could improve? And yes, it's very useful, and I absolutely think it's necessary. But do I enjoy receiving it? No.
That's
Absolutely not.
yeah, no, I mean, makes sense, makes sense. It's fine. Like, but do those conversations that you have with your team as well, whether it's giving feedback, providing feedback, discussing about what you did the weekend, allow you to
Mhm.
easily to identify upcoming leaders? Is it easy for you to
Mm.
do that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you identify of comic leaders by the way that they behave and the way that not only they behave, but the impact that they have and communication they project and the conversations they're having. Seeing people who are very focused on others, and I'm talking about people leaders specifically. Okay, and it can be different. You can have leaders, people who are leading in their field, but are not necessarily people leader or don't want to become people leader, but people who are engaged with others, who are inspiring in the work that they do. They also very focused on impact and what they can bring to themselves, but also more importantly their team and the business. That's the kind of stuff that I look for when I interact with people on a day-to-day basis, of course.
Mhm. And does this like also make conflict resolution easier? Like, I mean, like having those relationship built that you always
Of
said, like,
course.
yes.
Of course. I mean, a big part of my job and my leadership team's job is to, and not just leadership team, like ideally everybody on the team is to build relationships. It's to build relationships with stakeholders, with other people within the team, with other functions. And you do this because one, you want to understand, the other person's scope and how what they do and how it impacts the business. But it's also about making sure that when something goes wrong, you have an existing relationship and you can have a conversation that is going to carry some weight because you've had other conversations, you've spoken from a place of expertise to a stakeholder, and you are aligned, you're on the same page as to what you're trying to achieve. And when something goes wrong, it's much easier to have that conversation and explain, okay, well, this is what happened, this is the plan we have in place, and they know you, they trust you, you build trust. And so for me, that's essential
Yeah. Yeah.
to do, and it's a big part of what I spend my time doing and what my team should be doing.
Well, that's great. That's beautiful. Not everybody says that. So
Well,
extra point for you.
I
Yeah.
can only speak for myself, but
Yeah,
yes.
no, that's great. That's great. And I want to ask you one thing that is like another hot topic of today, which is like also this like we're from another generation, let's say, but we are like
I am.
always we're speaking a lot about like how to manage nowadays, especially since after the pandemic, this like work
Mm,
balance. Is there any particular tips you have or any particular things you like? I come home and I freaking disconnect. You can call, don't call me or
yeah,
what is your
yeah. It's really interesting. In my career, I've known some very rigid work model where when I used to be on the vendor side, and this was like literally a previous century, we didn't even have laptops. We had like what do you call them?
writers?
Desktops. Yes.
Oh,
Young people listening, they used to be like desktop. It was like a television. It was on anyway. And so when I used to go home. I was completely disconnected. Like sometimes you could access this really weird clunky portal to access your email, but that was not a thing otherwise. So it was very easy to disconnect. But the flip side is that there was very little flexibility.
Hmm.
Like if you needed to attend a doctor's appointment, you had to take like half a day off, and it was, it was very inflexible. When I moved to the US and I moved to the buyer side, I was given a laptop, and all of a sudden, for me, it was great because there was a lot of flexibility. There was, yes, I worked late, but I could leave early and pick up my kids who were very small at the time. I could work around their schedule and my family's schedule, and it was much easy. And then came the pandemic, and all of a sudden, everybody was stuck at home, and people realized, oh, we can do our jobs, without seeing each other and without being in an office, which is true to some extent. You can do the day-to-day stuff, and you can, and I work from home, and I can do that. I personally think that by not interacting in person, we miss a lot of the human connection and the piece that inspire us and make us more creative and make us more engaged. And I feel a little sad when I see some maybe younger generation, maybe millennial. I don't work with Gen Z yet. They're probably too young, but when some people express like, oh well, I wish, I just want to, do my stuff from home, I don't need to interact, and I'm thinking, well, they've never known anything else, maybe, and so I do feel that they miss something there. Maybe that's me being older. I don't know, but certainly for me, I that human interaction is really necessary, and I love it when I can travel and go and see my teams
Yeah,
and then speak to my stakeholders in person. That it's an entirely different experience for me. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
yeah.
Like, if you would to give some advice to someone that is entering new now the industry in a leadership position, because there's a lot of people that get like they have to step in, or what kind of advice would you give them? Like,
Well, I mean, it depends. Entering in a leadership position, like if you are a new leader, maybe managing a small team of fairly junior people, um, I think it's still important to spend time with people. And if you cannot spend time with people in person, at least spend time with them, on a screen.
mhm,
Um, I, I think it's important to have, like, if you have people reporting into you, meet with them at, once a week. That's a minimum, and spend the time asking about how they're doing and how's their life. And of course, you don't want to intrude. You have to read the room as well and see. Some people will share more or less with you, and that's totally fine. It's their private life. But I find that I share these things, pretty easily with people, and that in exchange, people will do the same. You do need to create that rapport. It's not just about checking their work and have they achieved their goals and performance reviews. It's about creating a relationship. I
mhm,
was reading an article that was shared recently by our HRBP around how millennials, but especially Gen Z, are increasingly reluctant to become people manager,
mhm,
and for various reasons. Maybe they don't see value in it. They see maybe middle managers not being treated very nicely by tech companies. There've been a lot of layoffs in the past few years, and they're thinking, well, why should I do that? Why should I bother with something where maybe there's a little bit of monetary gain, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't feel the value of it.
mhm,
And that's kind of it's a bit sad. I do understand it, and I think it's in our role in companies, especially corporations, um, to change that, and maybe do more to value and show value to our middle managers, who are essentials. To make this work. Like, as long as you have human beings doing the work, you need people to manage them. And I don't especially want to have 30 people reporting into me, and so I'm very grateful that others on my team are managing. And but I thought, well, that's a bit scary that people don't want to do that. My first thought was like, oh well, that's fine. Skynet can manage them and they'll be okay with it. But then I read the article, so
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Cattell, hey, it's been a real pleasure having you here. and hearing from your experience, from your journey, from your perspectives on leadership, and how you've been able to thrive in a complicated, fast-paced environment like it's a tech world. Thanks for coming here, sharing with
Thank
us.
you. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Pleasure, my friend. So, well,
Thank
for
you, Javi.
no, it's thanks again. Thanks for watching those out there at home. We'll be back soon with a new episode of Emerging Minds with new leadership insights. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.